The film opens with a sweeping nocturnal view of Zone 414, a bustling city, as a helicopter soars overhead. A message urges residents to report any issues with androids to the Vape Corporation. The narrative unfolds in a grim, prison-like setting where a man, armed with a silenced gun, approaches a cell. Inside, a tearful girl awaits her fate. She reveals her ability to foresee the future and warns that those aiding her will meet a tragic end. Unmoved, the man executes her with precision, and then surgically removes a sensor from her skull. A speaker announces the completion of the test, freeing David Carmichael. The girl, now lifeless, is taken away on a stretcher. Exiting the cell, David encounters Joseph Veidt, who selects candidates for specific missions. In a recorded interview, David seeks details about his target's psychology. Transported to a castle, David is greeted by armed guards and led inside. The castle's owner invites him to a room with computers and discloses the disappearance of his daughter, Melissa Veidt, 3 weeks prior, claiming knowledge of her whereabouts but requiring a delicate approach to find her. The creator of the androids, also the founder of Zone 414, a city fostering seamless interaction between androids and humans, discloses his vision to David. He perceives his creation as an antidote to contemporary loneliness, emphasizing the rarity of close relationships in today's world. The owner passionately details the benefits and intricacies of his innovation, expressing certainty that his missing daughter is somewhere within Zone 414. Concerned about potential police interference disrupting the delicate balance of the area, he elevates the stakes for David's assignment and grants him access to Zone 414, strongly recommending initial contact with the android named Jane. The scene shifts to Zone 414, where Jane, a stunning android with blue hair, navigates an underpass. In a parallel narrative, Michael Mann expresses curiosity about Jane's presence. Jane cautiously observes her surroundings, featured in an android advertisement with a rich customer selecting an android companion. Though the androids appear perfect, the customer seeks sincerity and expressions of love, ultimately choosing a male android. Meanwhile, David Carmichael arrives in Zone 414, driving through its narrow streets in a yellow cab surrounded by androids offering services. As David explores the city, he encounters androids everywhere, and he approaches a hotel room greeted by a robot voice offering various favors. Simultaneously, Jane engages intimately with a male client, temporarily assuming the role of his lost girlfriend. She later reports the encounter to the observer, conveying warm feelings for the client. In Zone 414, Jane receives disturbing voice messages from a distorted male voice expressing a desire to kill her. The observer reassures her that such actions are prohibited in the zone. However, another encounter is brought to her attention, prompting her to swiftly navigate the night city streets with a fearful gaze. Arriving home, she hurriedly undresses, attempting to end a gall despite being an android, experiencing pain and bitterness. As Jane grapples with her predicament, David Carmichael visits her. They discuss Melissa Veidt, revealing that she is pretending to be a robot to escape her father's influence. David implores Jane to take him to Royale, the controller of the robots, but she refuses to avoid further complications. In a turn of events, David offers his assistance with her issues. During their conversation, Jane plays a threatening voice message from a mysterious stalker, referred to as the Stranger, who has been haunting her for 3 weeks. David notices a figure in the window and instructs Jane not to answer the door until she hears his voice. Setting off in pursuit, David fails to catch the stranger but discovers a camera on the roof with a picture of Jane. He deduces that the perpetrator will alter tactics now that their presence is known. Jane realizes she is being stalked, feeling a genuine sense of fear. Her emotional depth becomes apparent, showcasing that she possesses far more feelings and emotions than a typical robot. The following day, David Carmichael and Jane head to meet Royale. The managers, reluctant to discuss matters in Jane's presence, request her departure. David, seeking more information, asks Jane to leave the room. Royale expresses concerns about Jane, suggesting reprogramming due to her inquisitive nature and the inability to turn her off. However, reprogramming is not an option, as the inventor, Joseph Veidt, considers Jane a unique creation. Royale, considering herself part of an elite circle, subtly shares insights into dealing with the affluent individuals who control androids. She warns David of the danger involved and advises against getting involved in Jane's predicament. Despite this, David insists on focusing solely on his task, finding Melissa Veidt, taking the money, and leaving the area. Royale provides David with a written note containing the name and address of the next station he should visit. As soon as he leaves the room, Royale makes a discreet phone call, instructing a man to inform David about Melissa Veidt's location without mentioning her involvement. threatening consequences if her name is revealed. Arriving at the designated place, David and Jane are led to a dim room at the end of the building. There, they meet George Sitz, whose face is disfigured with an eyesore over one eye. George apologizes for the gloomy environment, explaining his skin sensitivity to daylight. He introduces his partners, Hamilton and Jaden, the latter resembling the girl from the movie's beginning, with a cut and bruised face. In a submissive posture, Jaden kneels at her master George's feet as he begins to recount the day Melissa Veidt appeared at his gate. Initially mistaking her for a robot, George claims Melissa had only been with him for 24 hours after striking a deal with David Carmichael. George proposes providing the remaining information about Melissa, but the agreement demands David surrender Jane for personal use for 2 hours. Despite finding Jane to be a magnificent specimen, George confesses that conventional intimacy doesn't interest him. He prefers more subtle acts. Jane, horrified by the revelation, steps back, fumbling for a glass on a nearby tray. In a swift move, she smashes the glass, creating sharp edges, and lunges at George, holding the broken glass against his throat. She demands the complete truth about Melissa Veidt, threatening him with swift retaliation. Frightened, George attempts to pretend that Melissa has escaped, but Hamilton inadvertently exposes the lie. Jane intensifies her attack, leaving George with no choice but to disclose Melissa's whereabouts. The couple hastily exits the room, jumping into a waiting cab at the entrance. They head to a junkyard, sifting through piles of scrap metal and rusted appliances in search of Melissa Veidt. David instructs Jane to wait outside as he enters a suspicious hangar with a flashlight, searching in the dark. The frame shifts focus to human feet, dangling some distance from the ground, heightening the suspense. Abruptly, Jane materializes behind David, her eyes reflecting horror. The focus shifts slightly upward, revealing a body hanging in a noose. Melissa Veidt. In terror, Jane flees the hangar and runs down the road. The scene transitions to a room, monitored by multiple video cameras, where David is questioned about his success in tracking down Melissa Veidt. The frame reveals the lifeless body of Melissa, bringing the shocking reality to light. Back in the castle, David engages in a conversation in the room where Melissa's body lies on a special stand. He contests the claim of suicide, highlighting the absence of an object to hang from at the scene. Joseph Veidt, considering himself the god of his empire, dismisses any investigation, fearing it would undermine clients' confidence and contribute to the empire's downfall. Veidt warns David against attempting to dismantle his kingdom, threatening to destroy him. David reminds Veidt of the payment for the search, which is promised to be in his account by the next morning. Leaving the castle, David leaves the grieving father alone with his daughter's body. Jane seeks solace from Royale, requesting to spare her certain feelings. Royale offers a bleak methodology for Jane to follow, urging her to stop thinking. Promising assistance if Jane listens, Royale proposes a deal. Subsequently, Jane breaks into David's hotel room, confessing to killing Melissa but expressing regret. David, skeptical, believes that Jane killed not just Melissa but the entire zone system where people attempt to escape from themselves. David asserts that Jane and her mistress are safe from danger since their owner, Marlon Veidt, has no interest in the investigation, willing to overlook anything to maintain the state's unshakable values. The conversation escalates to heated tones, with Jane defensively trying to probe David Carmichael's essence, touching upon the painful strings of his soul. Initially comparing her to a well-informed robot, David is caught off guard when Jane reveals personal information about him and his deceased wife, whose death he blames himself for. As Jane continues her revelations about David's secret desires and passions, he loses his temper and throws her out of the room. Undeterred, Jane persists, offering to help him extinguish the guilt he carries by temporarily becoming like his late wife. Intrigued for a moment, David grapples with his emotions but then grabs Jane by the throat, pinning her against the wall. When questioned about informing Marlon Veidt of her attack, David admits he didn't, surprising Jane. He asserts that his main mission is protection. Jane reminds David of his promise to deal with a man who wants to kill her before leaving the area. David, suspecting that Jane may desire death to escape eternal imprisonment, reflects on his late wife's similar desire due to a terminal illness. He admits to sensing when people want to die, revealing a complex interplay of emotions and experiences. In Joseph Veidt's office, David Carmichael confronts him about the $2 million transferred for his detective work. Unyielding in his arguments, David accuses Joseph of orchestrating the girl's death as a means to harm his powerful brother, Marlon Veidt. David suspects that Joseph, operating in the absolute shadow of his brother, is essentially representing himself by intimidating Jane, Marlon's favorite, to assert control. Joseph, shocked by the accusations, reveals an unsettling creation resembling an android, constructed from various living tissues and technical elements. The grotesque sight stands on a pedestal, seemingly breathing in pain. Joseph explains that a girl once discovered this monstrous creation, and had she reported it to her father, Marlon would not have forgiven Joseph for this blasphemy against the unique android creatures. Now, Joseph envisions Royale as the scapegoat for the hanging girl's death. David insists that Joseph belongs behind bars, but Joseph is confident his brother won't let that happen due to lack of evidence. He hints that David, in turn, will be left with no money. As for Jane, Joseph ominously declares he will consider what to do with her. The conversation takes a dark turn, with Joseph sounding like a real maniac. After their encounter, David lies to a video camera, claiming that Area 414 is safe. Returning home, Jane finds the maniac waiting for her. She attempts to defend herself with a knife, but he immobilizes her with a remote, rendering her unable to move while maintaining the ability to hear and feel. As the maniac prepares surgical instruments on the table, a tear escapes Jane's eye, signaling that something is amiss. David Carmichael rushes to her aid, but the maniac tastes the tear, acknowledging Marlon Veidt's meticulous attention to detail. In a sudden burst of strength, Jane breaks free, declaring her love for the hanged girl and beating the maniac relentlessly. An armed agent enters the apartment, finding Jane standing over the bloodied maniac. Jane pleads for the detective to end her misery by killing her. David, seizing the opportunity, places a gun in Jane's hands and points it at the maniac, revealing that he killed Melissa Veidt. Jane hesitates for a moment before shooting the maniac in the head several times. David confesses his regret for buying pills for his wife, and Jane concludes that they both will face destruction. In a recorded interview, David reveals that he couldn't locate Melissa Veidt. She was already with her father and uncle when he returned. The action shifts to the castle, where David reminds Marlon Veidt of their arrangement. Marlon finishes creating a new android, adorning it with a wig, his daughter, Melissa Veidt. The contract, videotaping all of David Carmichael's false testimony, becomes irrefutable. In the film's conclusion, the price of the contract becomes apparent as Jane finally leaves her prison through the open gates of Area 414, meeting David Carmichael at the entrance.